Greetings and welcome to the channel The Audiophilos y Locos. It's time, it's a great day to talk about the Pearl Acoustics Sibelius. But before that, I want to explain some things to you, at least from the point of view of a musician. So let's get started. Music is an idea, and hi-fi components are tools, they're instruments, they're appliances, there are toys that allow you to listen to the music that you like. But there are three components that are very important in the audio chain, which are the most similar to a musical instrument. And those are the microphone, the cartridge, and the speaker. Why? Because they require very delicate moving parts, and also that the maker makes sure that the sound has the tonal footprint that the designer desires. Because technically, you could design an amplifier or a preamplifier or a DAC or even a phono preamp. You could design them in a computer without even listening to them and produce them. And there are people who do that. So you could design an amplifier with 25 watts per channel, class A with 0.001 distortion. And then you can say, let's produce it, let's sell it. And then there's reviews from all those websites that you know that only measure and do not listen. But a speaker, it's an art. And in this case, when we speak about Pearl Acoustics, we're talking about a real musical instrument. Before I forget, I want to remind you that I interviewed Harvey Lovegrove from Pearl Acoustics, and we spoke about the Sibelius speakers. I'm going to put the link right there. One of the things that impressed me the most about Pearl Acoustics is that Harley is very involved in the music scene and is integrated the help of young musicians, talented musicians, and they have a foundation that contributes to their career. And they record their performances. They have some recordings available on their website, and I think that's incredible. It's great that a component designer, a speaker designer, is also knows how to record, but is also involved in the music world and knows what it requires to create, not just reproduce, but create. And to me, that's worth a lot. And more companies could be like this, help the creation of music and have material that we can listen to in the future, not only at home, but also to be able to go to concerts live. And there's another thing I want to explain to you, so please be patient with me. I have 4 different English horns like this that I use in different situations. In the Metropolitan Opera, my house, when I'm in the pit, I generally, if the operas are very long, I use a maple English horn. Why? Because it's very light, it's very nimble, it's very flexible, and it's not too loud. So if I need to blend in, it's very good to use it. However, I also have a violet wood Lore and also have a rosewood. And I also have a black granadilla wood English horn that comes from Africa, from Mozambique. And it's the most traditional wood used for woodwind instruments. You're used to seeing it. It's very likely that if you heard me play all 4 instruments, they would all sound the same to you or similar. But me, I'm making calculations and calculating the vibrato and the air and my reeds and all that stuff. I was lucky to have a friend from Colombia who is also a musician in the Cali Symphony in Colombia, and he also can record. So we decided to record me playing my 4 instruments. So what do you think? Can you tell the difference? Write it in the comments. It's important to know because it has to do with the art of listening and to be able to discern different timbres and colors that we like when we listen to speakers. So let's hear this interesting recording that Juan Guillermo made. Music is like water. It's like air. It flows and it cannot always be defined. Even the great scientists are still humble when they try to talk about music because there are some things that cannot be explained and that are very innate and part of us and the universe. The universe vibrates too, and the universe makes music. But that's why when you buy a microphone or when you buy a cartridge or a speaker, we have to really use our ears because these are musical instruments and they will transmit an emotion. They will make you feel good or they make you feel bad. And in this case, I think Harley has done a great job creating musical instruments of precision. And they're not for everyone though, but I want to explain why. Sibelius are made out of French oak, imported French oak in Belgium, and it takes 12 weeks to finish them from beginning to end. 360 hours of burn-in. The impedance is 7.2 ohms, and the recommended power is 35 to 75 watts. And the efficiency is 87 decibels per watt. They indicate that the maximum output is 105 decibels, but that seems to me a little bit high. You want to do probably 95 maximum. We don't want to end up being deaf, do we? We have to preserve our hearing. Each speaker weighs 23 kilos, so they're very well made, very solid. Again, made out of solid wood and glued like an instrument, not stapled. There's 2 versions of the driver. There's the SG, which comes from silver, and the CG, or copper. But they're supposed to be identical. Some people just prefer the copper color. In the description, I will leave some links to the page of Pearl Acoustics. I'm sure it's not the first time that you see this kind of speaker, the one that only has one driver, and that driver generates all the spectrum of the music. Some of them are paper, like Lauter. Others are ceramics, metal, made in Japan or made in Germany, Italy. There's also the field coil drivers. But these speakers do not necessarily fall in that category because they're not super efficient like most of these Wizardcon speakers types are. And also, you can make the boxes yourself. You can get the kits online. But these are solid wood and they are built like a musical instrument with varnishes and special glues. It's a big investment, almost $4,000. But in the end, it's a good investment because it will last a long time and the drivers are not expensive to replace compared to other brands. And it's a very simple design. If you have any problems with the wood, it can be easily repaired because it's real wood. This is why the wood doesn't necessarily contribute to the sound, but it has been tuned. It generates a particular kind of sound when you hit it with your knuckles. The thing I like about them the most is that they disappear. You don't really feel like you're listening to speakers. It's a very wide soundstage. And I feel a relaxation. It's very innate. That makes me smile when I hear them. I feel happiness. As long as the material is the right material for the speakers. Because they don't really do everything. They're not an SUV. Just like me. I can play the New World Symphony with my English horn, but I don't think I can play heavy metal or hip-hop music. You couldn't hear me, and it wouldn't be the right kind of sound or the right kind of distortion. Listen to the speakers with all my amplifiers. The sound changes, but with my XA25 Pass Labs, it sounds really great with these records. McCoy Tyner, a Chesky production. In the beginning, the first song is mostly a saxophone monologue of the tenor sax. And there was a lot of palpability, a lot of presence. You could hear the sound of the reed and the air and maybe some saliva or some spit going through the mouthpiece. And then McCoy Tyner comes in and he starts hitting the pedal on the beat like a metronome. And you can feel a little bit the bump in the distance, but it's got a very exciting presence too. Like there's some magic going on. Also, McCoy Tyner utters some words, and everything has just a characteristic presence that is just a direct connection to the amplifier. It's something that I find really impressive, and it's how it reveals music in its natural state. I really like this record too, Joanna Armatrading. Her range is very low, like a contralto, or lower than a mezzo-soprano. But she has a very robust sound. It sounds fantastic on the Sibelius. I also listened to some mono recordings, and beautiful, silky, velvety Ella record. She was a little bit younger in this record, and it's a beautiful sound. Her phrasing, her timbre. She always uses the right musical direction, and it always sounds right to me. I never get tired of hearing Ella Fitzgerald. And on the Sibelius, it was a revealing experience, beautiful and relaxing. And it makes me smile. Last night, I listened to this record of Parsifal, which are, of course, they are excerpts of a 5-hour opera, but it's good to listen in one record. It comes from a film. It's Monte Carlo Symphony Orchestra with Armin Jordan. It's a good recording, Erato. And, it's so beautiful to listen to Wagner. To me, Wagner, Parsifal, it's the most beautiful music you'll ever hear. You will hear it in Parsifal. Also Valkyrie, but it's great music in Wagner. Another thing that's very interesting I want to discuss about this, speakers of one transducer. It's the advantage of the Sibelius. When you listen to, let's say we go back to the McCoy Tyner recording, when you listen to the saxophone, and when you listen on a two-way speaker or three-way speaker, you hear the actual sound of the lowest octave on the woofer or the mid-range, maybe. But all the spit and all the air through the mouthpiece, all that stuff, all the detail is coming through the mouthpiece. It's coming through the tweeter. So you have two drivers trying to interpret one instrument. But with the Sibelius, everything feels in its entirety, just one image, one source, and that makes it more convincing. But something that I have complained for a long time about is that some of my favorite British speakers, some of them have very minimal crossover, like my EPOS speakers, ES11s, they don't have a crossover, they just have a resistor. And so when you listen to violin music with these kind of speakers, it doesn't matter the recording, any violin music, when you get to the E string and you go higher than 3 kilohertz, you can hear when the note jumps from the woofer to the tweeter and vice versa. As the violin goes up and down, if you are very careful, you can observe the tweeter activating and deactivating depending on the frequency. And that kind of bothers me when I notice it. But that doesn't happen with the Sibelius. As a matter of fact, that particular recording with Henry Sering playing Bach sonatas and partitas are the most convincing with the Sibelius. Listening to solo violin, I can even perceive the smell of the wood of the violin. It's extremely convincing. In this kind of thing, the entirety of the instrument, the integrity of the timbre of this instrument is never lost with the Sibelius. Now, of course, I have complaints too. And that is that this speaker may not sound so good like speakers with tweeters when you use complex music or music that's overproduced or that has, many tracks or edits or maybe movie soundtracks. In that case, it's not necessarily the best material for these speakers, although they are exceptions. But I would say jazz trios, solo instruments, harp, guitar, vocal music with small amounts of instruments, chamber music, Beethoven quartets, wind octets, all of these things are really, really excellent with the Sibelius. And another thing is that they behave really well with every amplifier I use. And I have 3 low power amplifiers. The SMSL VMV1A, which I just got. And actually I was very surprised with the quality of that amplifier. And my Almarro EL84, 4 watts per channel. They produce a very nice volume. With the past amp camp, I have said before that they don't really have great headroom, but they sound very pretty. And of course, with my X825, they sound incredible. So they are easy to get along with amplifiers, and they do sound different depending on the amp. And here comes a warning. If you're using a mid-fi receiver or a mid-fi amplifier that has some kind of a strong coloration or lack of detail, you're probably not going to like the speakers because you need good ancillary equipment. You need a good source. You need revealing components. Maybe a tube amp, a triode, or a push-pull. But a good source. That's what's going to give you a good satisfaction. We have to remember that we're not buying appliances. We're not buying toasters. Although the closest thing to it would be an amplifier. But even then, that doesn't count in the audiophile world. The Sibelius have to be listened with good electronics. Pearl Acoustics gives you a listening warranty, and you can return them if you don't like them. And I do recommend that you listen to them. They're kind of like the Magnepan LRSs. They have their own repertoire. They have their people. for certain kind of music. But if you want a natural and relaxing reproduction, I highly recommend them. For other things, unfortunately, I have too many speakers here to compare them. If the Sibeliuses were the only speakers in my house, perhaps I would get used to the sound. But I have quads here, and I'm a big fan of quads.
Pedro.
Okay, well, quads are old speakers and you can't get them anymore, and they're expensive. I think $4,000 for a speaker that's made in such an incredible fashion, like an artisan product, and give you this kind of sound, I think it's worth it. I mean, you can always still make them yourself, but you're going to have to make them with real wood, real French oak, and you're going to have to glue them. You're going to have to use the same process that they use for choosing the drivers and modifying them. These are very specific drivers for these speakers. Even though you could get the same drivers online, these are particular, has different windings for the voice coil. I received the speakers with stands and also with cables. But I can tell you, they sound really good without the stands too. You don't necessarily have to get the stands. They look pretty and they do raise them off the floor. Same with the cables. I think the cables are very transparent. But if you already have good cables, experiment with those first. Save the money and invest it on buying the speaker. The most incredible thing about the Sibelius is the bass that they can produce. I'm going to leave in the description a bunch of tests that I've done with them in YouTube shorts in different places of my house. But you're going to be able to hear what great bass they produce. But I mean natural. They're not booming or exaggerated. The bass is stable. If you listen to organ music or orchestral contrabass, the bass is the most natural. You can always add a subwoofer if you want more. The mid ranges are very impressive with the right material. But I say if the recording doesn't get along with the speakers, you're going to notice it more in the mid-range area. The high frequency is great. They're very extended. Don't you think that just because there's no tweeters, they don't have any highs? Technically, they don't need a tweeter because they can reproduce very high frequencies. However, I did try them with my Aperion Super Tweeters. I think the Aperion AMT, that one produced an extra dimension, but I don't want to show it because I don't want to offend the creator of the speakers. You can always add it yourself if you want to experiment, but they don't really need it. They're just perfect the way they are, and the idea is to not have any other components in the way. And it's for the person who loves music and appreciates tube electronics. They're very revealing with tubes. I recommend it, but with one condition, a personal reservation, which is I strongly suggest that, like the Magnepans LRS, that you listen to them before you buy them, or that you use their warranty to return them, because it all really depends on what repertoire you use. If you listen to Megadeth and like reggaeton and all that stuff, they might not be the right kind of speaker for you. They're not speakers to make noise. They're speakers to make music and to enjoy, and you're going to smile and you're going to get goosebumps. But I guarantee that you will get goosebumps. I want to thank Hardy Lovegrove of the company Pearl Acoustics and the whole team for sending me the speakers, for trusting me with them, sending me the stands and the cables so I could evaluate them. because I did request them, and they were nice enough to send them to me. Really happy to have this chance to spend time with them. As always, thank you so much for being here with me. And don't forget that you can go to the website, theaudiophilos.com, where we have a forum. And you can also buy my album in DSC High Resolution 128. Take care, and thanks for watching.